And Karen, are you taking attendance based on the names? Great.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So there, we have the minutes proposed for the September 15th meeting. And I do just want to note a change in those minutes. At 1:08, I confirmed Shannon made an amendment to the motion. And Karen, at that time, according to the video, you nodded an affirmation yes. I named it had been seconded by Anne, but our minutes currently say that there was no second in the minutes. But Anne clearly on the video seconded that amendment, and you, Karen, nodded yes in the affirmative. And then, Karen, you said all we needed to do at that moment was a vote. And so at 1:09, I stated those in favor of this amended motion. 4 members were in favor and 1 was not. And so the motion passed. And I said that. I was like, okay, the motion passes. And Karen, you nodded in the affirmative. I confirmed next steps were to bring both of the motions that passed, the vision and the scope of the work, to the full board, and then we proceeded. But the minutes that were shared with us all didn't reflect that. So I would like it to reflect that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes. Hi, Shannon. We're just going over the minutes from September 15th. I noticed a few discrepancies in the minutes. At the end, the last amendment at 1:08, I had confirmed Shannon made an amended motion, and it was articulated in the chat. We showed it. Karen had nodded yes. I named it had been who was going to second it. And Anne actually physically raised her hand and seconded that amended vote on video. Karen confirmed seconding. Karen then said at that moment, all we needed was a vote on video. And then at 1:09, I stated those in favor of this amended motion. 4 members were in favor and 1 was not. The motion passed. Karen nodded in affirmation. I confirmed next steps were to bring both of the motions that we had passed at the last board meeting to the larger board. And then the meeting concluded.
I'm sorry, so you're referring to which motions? Because there were several motions. You're referring to which motion?
I'm referring to the motion to evolve the purpose of the Vision Ad Hoc Committee to solidify the portrait of the educator of today and tomorrow, propose recommendations that remove barriers for candidates between successful completion of the state-approved educator preparation programs and teaching licensure issuance through an overarching vision, which includes recommendations related to regulations at statutes such as Section 14 of Public Act 2441, implementation of CAPE standards, EPP program approval, and educator workforce data. It was that motion.
That is not what I have recorded, but I will verify that and circle back. That is not what I have recorded.
Which one do you have recorded that you were which one were you affirming then?
I have to circle back.
Okay. So we will not proceed with the approval of the minutes. Was there anything else, Shannon or Anne or Jen, that you may have seen in the minutes that you just wanted to add as Karen circling back? No, I think that was the main
that
one.
was critical. Watching the video and then seeing the minutes, and I know you can't get every single wording in there, but there are some areas where I feel like for example, I was explicit about some confusions about the ad hoc committees and things like that, and those were also not reflected in the minutes. So I'm not a secretary, minute taker. I'm not sure how much is at the discretion of, but I feel like sometimes there are discussions that are being said that are that should be reflected in the minutes. Like that also, along with making sure that the proper votes are documented.
I think there just might have been a lot of confusion at the end of that meeting in terms of the number of motions. That's where Dr. Good, as the chair, would kind of restate and ensure that we were voting for the same thing and that we have the seconds and the motions as part of that. But I think that Karen going back and relooking at it and then tabling this to the next division ad hoc would be appropriate so that we can continue to work.
Okay.
Okay, we will press forward and an update to the up to the agenda as we were informed this morning. Jen, you shared the kind of written statement that you had shared earlier with me on the phone earlier in the week. And I wanted to just give folks an opportunity as a committee to ask any questions that they might have regarding the statement. So I will read it aloud just so that we all have it. On September 24th, Jen and I met to discuss the group's scope. At the Vision Ad Hoc, at my request, the information discussed was being provided in writing and will be reviewed today. I think it's very important that we take, we're a committee of people, so we should all be part of the conversation. I do not want to dictate the way it is gone as the chair. That doesn't feel right. So our board administrator, Karen, she researched the matter around determining, she researched the matter and sought legal confirmation regarding our purpose, I believe. It was confirmed that ad hocs may not alter their designated scope. In keeping with organizational protocol, ad hoc groups complete their work and are dissolved upon fulfillment of their work. The following pathway options are presented for us as a group to determine the preferred approach. 1, forwarding recommendations. So upon completion of our work, the Vision Ad Hoc will forward vision recommendations relevant to the work of other ad hoc groups for their consideration. 2, reassignment. Upon completion of our work, the Vision Ad Hoc members may be reassigned to other ad hoc groups. It says, please also note that any board member may observe and or submit ideas to any ad hoc group at any time. These 2 pathway options were presented for us as a Vision Ad Hoc group to determine the preferred approach moving forward while ensuring compliance with the board bylaws and legal confirmation and organizational board protocols. Jen, would you like to add anything or is that sufficient?
You're on mute, Jen.
Sorry, I think that's sufficient.
I did have a question. I had put it in email, but what were the questions that were presented to legal? Like, I was confused about that.
They weren't questions, they were confirmation of the board's bylaws and what the scope entails for ad hoc committees.
And what the scope of our bylaws is it, if, what do the bylaws say that we were, in reference to how we may have been out of scope?
No, the bylaws simply set forth how the authority is presented. You can read the bylaws. The bylaws say ad hoc committees shall be formed by and at the discretion of the chairperson. Membership to these committees shall be designated by the chairperson. That's the scope. That's what the bylaws say.
Yeah, so how were we out of scope?
By making a motion to evolve the scope of the committee. That can't be done. That's assigned by the chair. That function is given authority by the bylaws to the chairperson.
Go ahead, Jen.
So when this was all set up, I believe back in April, I believe it was to present like an overarching vision of what modernizing and aligning educator prep and certification pathways into the profession would look like. So far, this group has done, or our group has done vision for educator, but we have not yet done an overarching vision for ed preps and certification. I think the question that you're asking is how was that bypassed? We had some discussions, I believe, back in June. And the conversation as part of this was that this group is going to create a overarching vision, and that the regulations groups and the other statutory groups were going to do their own work. And that was reiterated in a couple of different spaces and meetings. By voting to change and take on the responsibility of Section 14, it was changing the scope of this group. So I think that in and of itself. And I think that we had even mentioned during the last meeting that we don't believe that is within the scope to change that. And that we have ad hocs that we were already establishing to tackle that work.
You mentioned that in the last meeting, or other members of the group?
I had mentioned it in the last meeting.
Okay. Any other questions from other members?
So, and this is just a matter of workability. I mean, I understand what the bylaws say, but it would be my interpretation that the chair establishes ad hocs and has that responsibility, but with the input and the professional courtesy of discussing and asking the larger board, is this a reason? Do we need this ad hoc? Why do we need it? I mean, just in a collaborative, it just feels to me, quite honestly. For example, I got an email on a Monday morning saying it was assigned to the Section 14 ad hoc. I was like, what? Like, it's just the process is problematic for me. I have to say that. I feel that an ad hoc is developed with concerns of a larger group, that then it is the right of the chair then to establish it, but not without some discussion of the board itself in terms of the need for an ad hoc in a particular area. And I feel like that's what's missing here, quite frankly. And that's a problem. That's a serious problem for me. To just be assigned, not even knowing what it is, to establish a new regulation ad hoc, not knowing what it is, and to question an existing ad hoc. Again, I understand what you're saying about the scope, but vision is such a broad scope anyway. I mean, so this is just getting very murky process, and that worries me going forward.
Thank you. I will state that, assigning membership provides continuity, accountability, and a core team to move work forward. Observers and contributors are welcome, and assigned members ensure that the work continues to be steady. This group was outside of our statutory obligations, but Rebecca felt really passionate about it. We thought it was a great idea in terms of what was specifically assigned to us in statute. For deadlines is what I mean there. And I thought it was a great idea. I think much of the board thought it was a great idea. I think the initial review of that educator vision, that would be a great lens as we continue our work as a board and within and ad hocs is wonderful. I'd like to see this group continue that work with the vision of an ed prep program and the vision of certification, so that those lenses can be used as we continue the work. Any recommendations that you have as part of the work, because there's definitely overlap. Section 14 has overlap with the work that the regulations group is tackling currently. So whenever there's overlap, the recommendation is obviously to forward that work to the specific group for their consideration through that expertise lens that you guys have provided. So that synergy and that flexibility is still there for the work, but the focus of this group has not been completed. The focus of this group was to create a vision for ed prep and for certification. And thus far, we have a vision for educators. So that work would need to continue and be completed. And then we can present that work to the board, and then any recommendations to the ad hoc for the work that they are, they're doing now and will be doing.
Yes, Shannon?
Yeah, I think there's process challenges that I definitely agree with Ann on, in terms of it just feels like it's getting convoluted and we're making too many fragmented groups as it is. And then I think you said you hit the nail on the head when you said that part of this group's next charge was the ed prep piece, which overlaps so completely with section 14 that it's like, how does this group not do that work if in because it's vision and specifics that are going to put the meat on the bones of what that new language is, and whether it's regulation, whether it's guidance. So I think what I had heard in prior meetings as we were hearing the report out from CPRL back in June was that was the next phase of the work of this group. And so I think as a practical matter, we're just trying to streamline and move things in a direction that maintains momentum and expertise tapped into. And I think where I understood we left the last meeting is just a recommendation to like merge these two committees together and not try to have them be fragmented and in parallel. So if there's a way to just recommend that as a efficiency and a way to not lose any time, because we already feel like we've lost a lot of time in trying to get to the ultimate goal of all this, which is not just a compliance exercise. Like, I think that's why this group got formed, is because this is so much bigger than compliance. And we want to get it right, because you only get one bite at the apple with something like this. And we don't want to waste the opportunity. And so this group, I think, is steering in that direction and lining right up with the next steps relative to section 14. So why wouldn't we keep going in that direction? It's just my question. And it just, and you haven't even convened the other group. So it's a perfect time to do that now before we further erode the cohesion.
I've paused the convening until this was resolved. I had already contacted CPRL, and I think they had forwarded me the document back in early August. So I already have that document ready to go, and it is in line with what we have done with all of our other statutory obligations in terms of setting up ad hocs and creating those ad hocs to tackle the statutory obligations and move that work forward. Again, the work of this group is overarching vision, the lens through which that we would be working as a board in ad hoc. So the two options currently for deliberation by the group is to continue your work and complete into completion, and then I think the language that was put into that was, upon completion of the work of our group, the vision ad hoc will forward vision recommendations relevant to the work to other ad hoc groups for their consideration. The second option is reassignment upon completion of that overarching vision, and anything that comes out of that, they could be reassigned, which would be that merging component. I already have Anne, which I know that she had spoken to at the last meeting, assigned to that group. So it's really up to her if she wants to continue or not. I am really careful about ensuring that nobody is typically overburdened and that we have people spread across several different ad hocs, as this is all voluntary, and that there are multiple lenses on the vision. I'm sorry, on the section 14, I have technical school programming, I have alternative route programming. With Ann, I have traditional EPP programming, I have classroom teachers, I have administrators. So I really do think hard about who to assign and, you know, try to pull in people for opportunities to contribute in this way in a flexible and open conversation format within those ad hocs. And for that collaboration piece there. So really our group is kind of deciding on the two options currently before them that align with our bylaws and our protocols that we have used in the past as well.
Jen, the two options don't exactly align with our bylaws. In reviewing the bylaws, thank you, Karen, for recommending that. It says ad hoc committees shall be formed by and at the discretion of the chairperson. Membership to those committees shall be designated by the chairperson, which you have very clearly been doing. In making designations, the chairperson shall appoint a voting member to serve as a chairperson of that committee. Those are the three sentences in our bylaws. That does not say anything about the chairperson defining the scope of what the ad hoc committee is discussing or how they define like what they are discussing.
At the discretion of the chair.
And so I'm just going to finish my point.
Sure. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And so I want to make sure that those lines in our bylaws, you are asking of us to like forward the recommendations or be reassigned, but it doesn't, like, the scope of what we do is up to us as board members.
It is at the discretion of the chair when establishing an ad hoc. So when it was set up, the scope was to modernize and align educator preparation certification pathways into the profession to look at what could be. It was an overarching vision.
Yes.
It wasn't, no statutory obligations were assigned to the group as part of this work.
That you're separating out that is part of the vision. So that actually like aligns perfectly. In my point of view, Shannon, I see you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I don't think you can separate vision from practice if there's a technical connection between the two, which I think this was where this group was headed in the first place before we knew there was even the idea of a separate group focused on section 14. So I think that's just it's nuanced, but it matters. And I think that this group, how it doesn't look at section 14 as part of a vision that is fundamentally focused on the ed prep piece of the equation, it just is very disconnected and just inefficient in terms of how we use our time.
So I don't think it's inefficient if you complete the tasks that were assigned and then any recommendations then get forwarded, which has been the protocol of the board and previous ad hocs in terms of precedence as well. So at this time, the ad hoc is instructed to decide on which pathway they would like to move forward in. And then once the completion of those things are done and we vote to move any recommendations to wherever as part of our work, there's going to be a natural aspect of overlap. You know, then that can happen. And any member of this group and any member of the board can attend any ad hoc and submit any recommendations as well. So Rebecca did that, I think that with the 13A one, initially, I don't think she was assigned to that one, and she had started going to them and providing some ideas on waivers and pathways. So at any time, folks can attend other meetings and or submit even in writing any ideas that they might have.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, I was on that committee. Thanks.
Oh, my
With-
apologies. I thought
yeah.
that you had come on after.
No. I mean, what we're like proposing is that neither one of your preferred approaches like actually like fit within, it sounds like I prefer neither.
I too. I mean, I honestly feel that I have now, this is the third meeting that I have clearly indicated that I felt there was a redundancy between this, the vision committee and the proposed section 14 committee, ad hoc committee. And honestly, Jenna, this is simply a process issue. This isn't even, it's not even about the material aspects of it. It's saying that in order to streamline this, in order to have clarity about what we're doing, if you have 5 or 6 members of the board indicating to you that they don't feel there's clarity there, that should be addressed. I mean, it just can't simply be, well, but that's not what the ad hocs were designed for. I know that they were established by you, but I think inherent in a bylaw, when it says the chair has the right to establish, as a chair of a board, it means that you take the input of the board to make that decision. And I really feel like, at least in this particular case, that there's a lot of input that's being ignored. Because this is like the third time we've been discussing this and saying, you know, we want to be able to do this in an efficient way. We see section 14 as being critical. Vision can't be separated, Shannon's right, from practicality of what we do. That they're intertwined. I don't even see how we would go forward and do that. You know, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see how that could be.
Sure. So it was discussed at the last meeting and it's being addressed at this meeting. If there isn't consensus, then the fallback is that recommendations are forwarded. So it's really up to the group to kind of discuss. There have been recommendations that have come out of the regulations group already for possible legislative language, right? So, you know, those things can get forwarded to the places where that work would be done. They don't have to sit in isolation. There can be a level of collaboration and overlap. And being on this group as well as potentially on the other one, you would be able to bring that information firsthand from this group to the other one. Anyone from this group can attend those meetings as well. But at this time, it has already been confirmed. It was discussed at the last meeting, and it has been confirmed. And thus it's up to us to decide which pathway we would like to go down. Should we not have consensus on a pathway, then the fallback would be making recommendations as part of that. And you're going to come up with recommendations. You're going to come up with ideas. We are going to do that work as part of this, right? Through the research that CEPOL is helping to provide, as well as Karen. That is going to be natural to the process, just like it was natural to the other ad hoc processes. I just want to ensure that this group completes their task and submits any kind of recommendations or gets pulled into another group once those tasks are completed. But currently, the group was assigned with coming up with a vision, an overarching vision, a lens in which the board and the ad hocs can work from for educator prep and for certification. And currently on the books, what we have is a vision of what an educator is, and we need those other 2 components completed.
The vision for educator preparation, which you just said.
Yeah.
Oh, Cynthia,
Which is
I saw,
section 14.
which is section 14. Cynthia, I see your hand.
Thank you. I'm just going to share some kind of big picture thinkings, and I've already talked with Jen to give some feedback as well. So I'm hearing is some confusion, communication, shared understanding. You know, these are some of the structural aims. And my suggestion was to back up a little bit, and if we could have like a one pager of the overarching vision of the group, and then each ad hoc, what was the 3 bullets of the focus for each ad hoc, all on one page, you know, and who's been assigned, when they're meeting, when the links are out, all of the resources perhaps in a shared file. So these were just some brainstorming that I was thinking about, because I feel like that structure has to be in place in order for the work to move forward, because everyone has to clearly understand what the work is. So with that said, could there be an idea to kind of pause this committee, come back as a whole group and talk about all of the ad hocs and talk about kind of mapping out the goals to accomplish what we're going to accomplish over the next couple of months? Make sure everyone has a shared understanding, make sure everyone knows where the resources are, and then in the schedules for these ad hocs, and then jump back into the ad hocs. I don't know if just my idea. I feel like in order to move forward, we almost have to move backward and then have a clear outline of the work for everybody.
So,
Cynthia,
go ahead, Rebecca.
that's a really that idea really resonates with me. It also lifts it brings a level of transparency, which I think is something that we are lacking right now as to how I understand the chair defines the ad hocs and the committees, but that overarching for the whole board, it also could help in encouraging people who, I know you're just assigning, Jen, but I think people would like to like add their names to lists. And so having a larger vision like that for us as board members would be very helpful.
Agreed. I think
So
that's
what
a
I'm
great
hearing-
idea, Cynthia.
What I'm hearing is Cynthia and I already planned to meet to discuss some ideas already, and figure those out in advance of the October meeting. October, yeah, or in September, October. So what I'm hearing is that there is a call to pause this group.
Well, not only to pause, but to pause with the intent of doing what Cynthia recommended, which is to have a transparent overview of the ad hoc work, which again would help to address my consistent confusion over what I'm doing, because I'm not being funny here. I really don't see what the roles in the vision's scope of each ad hoc truly is. I'm being assigned to these. I need to know that in order to do the work legitimately. So I appreciate that, Cynthia. I think it would be helpful.
Could we
And-
have a special meeting? Like a meeting before the October 20th full council for the purpose of resetting and then get back to work, because time's ticking. We have a lot of work to do.
Very
So
true.
you mean Cynthia, you and I meeting to discuss the things for all the ad hocs then, what we had discussed before?
So I think, yes, if you like the idea of making a one pager, I had shared, I'm happy to help you with that. If we could do that, where we outline all of the details on one page, if it fits, or two, send it out to the committee, and then call a special meeting only for the purpose of reviewing the vision of the scope of work over the remainder of 2025. And then reinstate the ad hocs at the end of that meeting. And then when we come back on the 20th, we could continue to move forward as the council.
So I think I'm hearing, Cynthia, you saying pause all committee work at the moment, all committees, and you and Jen would draft, here is the vision of the ad hocs right now, here is the objective of each, and then that comes to the board in a special meeting. We'd have a special meeting of the entire board
Mhm.
to be able to see if that aligns with the board in totality, not just exclusively like the chair. Does that fit, Jen, within the scope of the bylaws?
I think that right now this group can decide if they want to pause their own. Cynthia and I already had a conversation about addressing this and making it an agenda item. I think what we said is that we were going to meet between now and October 6th to ensure that we had that on our October meeting for the 20th. If this group does not want to pause and want to continue their work on identifying a vision for ed prep and a vision for certification, they can certainly continue that work while Cynthia and I are working on that for the October meeting. There was a lot of trickiness with the month of October due to different holidays and fighting Mondays and what have you to meet. And we do have an expectation of having materials in by a certain period of time to our members. So that's why Cynthia and I had said that we would meet between now or last week when we talked about this and October 6th to ensure that we had that in for the October meeting and have that on the bylaws or on the agenda for the October meeting. So the question before this group then is if they want to pause their own work and continue and that's where it is.
Great. So I see the question as I just heard you clearly state like our responsibility is the vision of ed prep and educator. And so with that in mind, I am comfortable going through and with the vision of of educator and aligned educator preparation, which was already on the agenda. And the only pause would be we will take a pause in deciding between the two pathways that you have recommended, so that given that everybody got to see that just today, except for you and I, and give folks an opportunity to reflect on that as we continue in the work and then come back to that.
Sure. In terms of the work, the survey that was brought to the board and stated to the board that would be going out is still on hold for Dr. Good. So we would have to decide on whether or not that survey is going to continue. And it is the overarching vision of an educator preparation program and overarching vision of our certification process, because we did a wonderful job and people did a lovely job with the presentation. I think the only critique that we provided both in this meeting and in the board meeting was that the research being used should be in the top 10 to 20 nationally ranked states for public education. So I think those were the only items which we had kind of put out there, and they were listed as action items, I think in the June or the July meeting as part of that. So yeah, if this group, I say this group because I have to jump off shortly, but if this group wants to pause on making the decision and continue their work, and then of course at this time forwarding any recommendations that might come out of that to Karen to then disperse out to wherever it might need to be. And then Cynthia and I already planned on meeting to discuss the items in preparation for the October meeting.
Yes, Shannon.
Is there a scheduled meeting of the Section 14 group?
So we have a date marked, but we haven't sent the communication out because we are waiting to kind of firm up this. Correct.
Can I just,
To
I
firm
mean,
up
one of
what?
the,
Sorry, to firm up
to
what?
have to firm up this component of it in terms of like which pathway option we were going down into, ensure that you guys were all like in a good space without moving it to the next meeting. But we've already gotten confirmation as to when people would like to meet, and we have a date that we are going to be sharing out.
I didn't get that.
I know it hasn't gone out yet. The request on which dates would work was sent to everybody on the ad hoc.
dates would work for the,
What times and days work best for the first meeting? That was sent out quite some time ago. It was the message that you had spoken about at the last meeting, stating that you were surprised that you had gotten it. I think there was a follow-up to that one, and Karen could confirm what date that was sent out for, what dates might work best for everybody. And members of that group have already responded with days of the week and times that work best for them. So we will be sending out that information.
I mean, I'll just make one more plea for, I think, the idea that this is a group that, but I feel like our charge has been predefined and put in a box for us. And what we ultimately did was lead to a place where we saw section 14 as very aligned with the direction that this group was going in. And so I'm just trying to understand the objection to streamlining and making this, like, what is the downside of converting this group into taking on the section 14 charge if no work has started yet?
been
And any members of that group would be able to come over here, and then the vision and the practice can be 100% aligned and coherent. I mean, I'm assuming, the goal for everyone. So what is the objection to that being the way we proceed?
What is the objection to that being the way that we proceed? It doesn't align with what we've set forth in the past. It wasn't what was the charge, and the charge of this group has not been completed yet. So to take on the responsibilities and roles of another group seems.
But our
tricky.
charge evolved as we figure, I mean, vision
Yeah.
is a big kind of ambiguous definition, and it evolved to get into this direction where we are landing squarely on section 14. So how does that, why isn't it possible for a committee to evolve in such a way that this just makes practical sense as a next step?
I think that your work will provide good information for the groups that are charged with that. And one of the two pathways provided is that once that work is completed, even with those recommendations, this group can then be added on to the other groups that are working, because they're going to be looking specifically at regulations in those areas. So I guess my question then becomes, why would this group not complete their tasks before evolving into taking on the responsibilities of another ad hoc?
Because the other ad hoc was born. Why did you feel the need to create that other ad hoc? If it was already coming, if we already were under the vision with Educator Prep, why the need to uplift another one? So I think it's the same question. Like, why would that ad hoc need to come into our lane?
So I think what we talked about on several different occasions, Rebecca, and I'm happy to talk about this outside of the meeting as well. But on several different occasions, it was stated that it's going to help guide the work of the rest of the board, including statutory obligations that we continue to get done. And I went on to say that Vision Ad Hoc to help in that work and guide that work based on the outcomes of our vision that we create to guide looking through the regs, updating and the regs, reimagining what they could look like. It wasn't that you guys would be taking on that responsibility. It was that you were creating a vision for the work of those groups and the work of the board. Went on to say, this ad hoc group is outside of the regs, which I believe Rebecca had stated. If they weren't there, what would we put together?
What are you reading from?
I'm reading from the notes that I took from, I believe it was the June vision meeting. The rest of the kind of the meetings, and went on to say the rest of the kind of meeting spaces are for the actual regs that we are trying to shift and change in real time because we have deadlines. Does that resonate? So yes, gleaning information, kind of like where the vision or where we are kind of.
I'm sorry, I just want to pause because are you quoting me from notes that you wrote?
Myself, and it was a discussion, I believe, at the June meeting. So during those meetings, we had stated that that this group was going to do that overarching work that would help guide the board. Is there going to be ideas that come out of it? Absolutely. That's what groups do. They come up with different ideas. And it might be something that we bring to the board. It might be something that we bring to the ad hocs that are working on those regulations. But we do have groups that are already established that are working on regulations and statutory deadlines. And this group was not a statutory deadline ad hoc. This was an overarching vision for the board to use. It was more general. It was more,
but
can
that's
we
to your
cross-reference this?
definition. That's like, you're like, you're putting on
I
your
mean,
definition and you have multiple people, board members saying our definitions don't align with yours. And so if you're like, it's only my way or no way, just let us know. We don't waste, like, so we don't waste our time. But if this is a collective board doing the work, then like listen to your other board members here saying, we do not understand your process right now or your definition right now.
Okay.
Right.
So for this group currently, are we going to pause this work or continue this work? I will be meeting with Dr. Ritchie to discuss the things that will move forward to the October meeting. And
we're gonna continue. We have things to bring to the October meeting from this group.
as they relate to the vision.
As they relate to a vision of educator and educator preparation. Overarching vision.
Perfect. So at this time, without consensus, since there is no consensus and you guys are thinking of putting this on your next agenda.
Think you're putting what? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Yeah, what are you saying?
Putting the decision on the two pathways offered on your next meetings. I think Rebecca had said that the group needs to digest that and then decide afterwards. I think the pause was on making a decision. So barring consensus currently, any recommendations would go to the ad hoc until there is a consensus by the group.
What ad hoc?
The section 14, if it's related to that, or if it's related to regulations, it would go to the regulations ad hoc.
Are you saying that? Why?
I'm really confused now.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry.
really confusing.
I'm like
I don't know what you're
wicked
saying.
confused.
So the charge of this group is to create an overarching vision for educator preparation and for certification. And any recommendations that might come out of that for regulations would go, or legislation would go to the ad hocs assigned with those tasks. So if it's regulation specific, it would go to the regulations group for them to kind of import with their work because they're knee deep in working into that regulations work. If it is related to any other language, it would go to section 14. I'm happy to share with you the meeting information for that meeting and the rest of the board as well for anybody who would like to attend that meeting once it has been established.
So does section 14, being that those are regulations, so we could make recommendations to that ad hoc. That ad hoc committee, section 14, would then make recommendations to the regulations ad hoc, and then that would then make recommendations to the board.
No, that's not what I'm stating. So
but I thought you just said any recommendations for regulations must go through the regulation ad hoc, but the section 14 are regulations, so that would also need to go through the regulation ad hoc.
And the regulations ad hoc has, because no regulation kind of sits on its own typically, they're looking at all the different things that it ties into. So if you have a recommendation or an idea, it would go there because then they can vet it against the other regulations that they are currently working on. So at this time, so it's already 12:53. So to ensure that this group has additional time to work, what I heard was—
Oh, Jen, you don't need to like call it. You can hear Anne's question. Go ahead, Anne.
Thank you. It's more a comment than a question. One of the reasons why I got on this board is because the year prior, when we were discussing developing a process for doing this work. The idea was that as a board, we were not going to be knee-deep in regulatory situations, but that in fact we were going to devise a more flexible, ultimately more future-oriented teacher preparation certification process, which would provide guidelines and pathways rather than regulatory language. It seems to me that by emphasizing a regulatory ad hoc and everything that we do goes through it, that completely has unhinged the board that I stepped onto because of the idea of doing this process in a way that is more guideline and less regulatory, that changes the process, doesn't continue it. And so I have serious concerns that what we were charged to do from the first year of the putting this board together, that it has shifted its focus and that we need to get back to that. And that needs to be a discussion of the full board because it really is very different, Jen. And it is not one that I either support or signed up for, to be perfectly honest. And I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but it's a serious, it's taking a left turn when everybody expected a right. You know, we're on a totally different direction than what the ideology was for starting this board in the first place. And I just want to make that clear. I want it to be on record because I feel very strongly that going into deeper regulatory language and hierarchy of regulation is really what we were trying to avoid in the first place.
Yeah.
If we go back and center ourselves on what our statutory requirement is, it also speaks about regulation and legislation in there, and that it is our responsibility to propose both regulatory and statutory language in this work and modernizing, because it hasn't been done in 30 years. And the board has discussed and looks forward to the regulations that are being brought forward by the group that is currently working on it. And at our last meeting, if I'm remembering correctly, we had expressed that we were starting with the sunsetting regulations, and there was not an objection by the board in that conversation and that presentation of updated information. So I understand that, it may feel different, but I also want to honor the work of the people that have been doing the current work and the importance of us getting that done. Both CPRL went through and checked the regulations and made recommendations on which regulations should be sunsetted, which ones might need alternative language.
That's done.
That's been done.
As SDE has. It hasn't been done because in order for it to be done, it has to be submitted to the regulatory process, which it has not been.
Those
yet.
have already been sunsetted.
They're
That has already been in the last public act. I don't need to go into the details of that. I have a lack of confidence. I have no confidence in your understanding of how the regulatory process has already been accomplished and actually where we stand right now and here today. I do know that we were committed to bringing the vision of an educator and our proposal for a vision for educator preparation to the larger board. I do not see any reason at this point, based on what we have, to bring that to a Section 14 committee that has not yet met, or a regulatory committee that's looking at sunsetted regulations. They can continue to do their thing. We're going to be looking forward. That is status quo. I think people are working hard. I also think people are confused. This conversation's been confusing. So I'm more than happy to continue the discussion to look at the work that CPRL did, just so that we can all affirm what we want to share with the board come October 20th.
So then, as it stands for Karen's note-taking purposes, 2 options were provided. Our group has decided to table them until their next meeting for review on which of the 2 options they'll be moving forward, understanding that without consensus until that decision is made, any recommendations would go forward to Karen to then disperse at this time.
No, we do not agree.
Okay.
Like, we don't agree.
Okay. And that I will be working with Cynthia on the other items that we had already discussed prior to this meeting as vice chair and chair. So what is next on the agenda?
So I just want to make sure that that's very clear, Karen. That is not an agreed upon decision based on this ad hoc committee that was shared. So yes, the meeting between you and Cynthia, but it is not an it is not in supported to the long kind of sentence that just streamed out around tabling and anything moving forward. We'll go through recommendations and all that. That is not something that we have agreed upon.
So you did state that you would table your decision on the 2 pathways, correct?
We can table the decision on the 2 pathways. We do not agree to like anything, the rest of your statement.
Okay, so currently we are tabling until the next division meeting to decide on the 2 pathways.
I don't want to decide on the 2 pathways at all. They weren't pathways that I recommended or that this committee recommended. They were just given to us this morning. So I don't think we have to commit ourselves to a decision. We can commit to tabling what was put forth to consider what we do with them, but I don't know what I want to do with them. How's that?
Shannon?
I really don't, because it wasn't, and I do think that Cynthia's very collaborative point of just clarifying for me. And again, I feel like just what the ad hocs are, what they are doing, where they are going, when they are meeting, all of that needs to happen. And you're absolutely right. You need to take a step back and consider the process. The process has been murky. It doesn't make sense to continue to go forward when a number of people are feeling very confused and unsure of the process. That's not going to be helpful in the long run. We're trying to shift the focus so that we can figure this out. But you need to be hearing, Jen, and as chair, I think it's important that you're hearing this is not just being obstructionist. This is trying to figure out what we're trying to do here. I'm legitimately saying that I am confused. And I need clarity to move forward to get anything done. And that needs to happen. Otherwise, I think everyone else, I can't imagine that I'm the only one. I'm sorry, but that's important for you to
Point
hear.
of order.
Yes.
Point of order. This committee does not have it in their purview to challenge the work of other committees. If you would like to pause your work as the divisioning ad hoc committee, that's within your purview. But it is not within your purview to challenge the functioning of other committees. That is within the board's purview.
The board's
And all
purview.
of the entire
I'm not-
board.
I don't think I'm
Pardon me.
challenging
Point of
Karen.
We're
order.
not
I'm asking for
challenging the other committees.
clarification.
She's
Point of order.
questioning. She's not
There is
challenging.
also on the website, all of the ad hoc committees are listed, and the membership is also listed for each ad hoc committee on the Connecticut Educator Preparation and Certification Board. On the website, every ad hoc committee is listed, and every member for each ad hoc committee is listed for everyone
names.
to see and for transparency purposes. It's all listed. It's been updated. It's there.
Karen,
So-
I appreciate that, and I know the names may be there, but the purpose of them and what they're established to do is not necessarily clear to me. And that's different than the names of who's on there. That's all. And honestly, it's really just, I am not challenging. I am asking for clarification. There's a big difference.
Yeah,
Shannon?
I just want to second the statement that I think it's just a better understanding of the justification for why the committees exist and why there wouldn't be a case to be made for merging two committees, one of which hasn't even met yet, to continue the course of work that was already starting to build under this committee. And so I think in the meantime, absent pausing, this committee should talk about the vision of educator preparation, which is also going to fulfill the requirements of Section 14. So we will completely converge with the work of the Section 14 group just by nature of what we're discussing and articulating. And that vision, I mean, the regulatory process, as Rebecca said, is kind of cart before the horse, because you don't get to that, level of detail till you've figured out the visioning piece. And so the sequence, they can't happen the way this is happening. It has to be a sequence where this vision group leads into the Section 14 group. If they need to be redundant, it sounds like they're going to be redundant for now, but I would love for an opportunity for the full board to consider removal of such redundancies wherever possible. So with that, I hope we can start to hone in on ed prep as a topic of focus.
That's a great, and I just, Karen, I know that you pointed out that all the committee members' names are online, but when you go into the vision, like even for the visioning ad hoc committee, when you look under committee members and you click that link, it's just the entire board. So we actually don't have, unless so, and if you, same thing with the regulatory and ad hoc committee, that actually is a broken link. And the committee for Section 14, that also just shows the committee members as the entire board. So I think that
That is
might just be an
something I will
error.
have to get, yeah, that's on the
Yeah.
webmaster. I have no control over what is posted. I only relay the information, and the webmaster has the duty of updating what is given to her.
Yeah, I know you had just stated that it was like all clearly there, and I just wanted to make sure like
It should have
we would
been,
love
it should be,
Yeah.
but I will follow up. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It is
Um,
there. If you click on members on the homepage and you scroll down, it is there.
When you go into visioning ad hoc committee and it says committee members, it is not there.
Right. That was supposed to be changed so that we had all of them in one place for anybody in the public to be able to view all the ad hocs. So if you look at membership on the homepage, where it lists all of the board members, and then below it lists each of the ad hocs with the board members there.
I think just helpful clarity will make it better. Cynthia?
So just to kind of move us along, because time is ticking, would we be okay? I think we all agree that the next full board meeting, we will be reviewing a vision for the full committee, for all of the ad hocs, for the membership, for the dates, et cetera, et cetera. For now, I see our colleagues are on from CPRL as well. Do we want to get into reviewing the vision of an educator today, or continue with the ed prep work?
Yes, let's continue. For our meeting today, we sent out the updated document from the CPRL team. Thank you, CPRL team. If you could pull that up, that would be wonderful. CPRL yes, I am allowed to ask them. Tong, can you please voice over what was added to this version of this based on the feedback that was given?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me? Is my
Yes.
sound perfect? So most of the feedback was the feedback from the full board meeting in August, and there were a few that were reflected in there. The first is, I think, just a sort of like a technical edit where some board members have said that the reference of K through 12 should be pre-K through 12, just for clarity and just for completeness. And so we just kind of updated that throughout, references to K to 12, pre-K to 12. And then the other edit is there is a quote. If you go to the next slide, third slide, another slide. Yeah, so here there is a quote. Sorry, just one slide back. So there is a quote there that we agreed to kind of cut short. So we set out the whole quote verbatim, and I think there was some kind of there's a feedback that it's like the second part of the quote is not relevant, just to cut it out. So we did that as well. And I think the second quote kind of relates to admin being in classrooms to look at, to take part in like PD or like classroom observation. And so I think there was one comment from the board that was not kind of mission critical. So we took that out. And then those are like the technical amendments. And then in terms of like the substantive, like more substantive feedback that we got, that we processed, one was, there was this, and so this is not something we kind of added to the slide per se, but there was a question about, how do EPPs, like what ways can EPPs foster greater collaboration? Because obviously one of the qualities in the vision is educator as collaborator. And so the question of kind of how do EPPs, is there any kind of, what has been done nationally? We haven't put anything there, but kind of in my cover email to the board, I kind of explained. The only thing we really came across is models in kind of states or kind of state universities that place students in sort of district environments where co-teaching is a thing. And so things like ASU, as you can imagine, ASU has, they're big on strategic staffing and sort of collaborative teaching. And so there they had a pilot a few years back where they put their teacher residents in districts where there is like a team teaching model. So you have a co-teacher with a resident looking after, and sort of teaching, 2 to 3 classrooms. But short of that, and that's obviously quite like a blunt sort of way to foster collaboration. And so we didn't really put that into the slides. If you want to, we could, but that's kind of the only thing. And in terms of like the curriculum and stuff, we haven't found anything about how sort of EPPs directly foster collaborative skills in their courses or sort of clinical experiences apart from that one. And then the last substantive kind of thing we added, I don't know who has control of the slides. Is it Rebecca, you have control? Could you scroll just like a few slides down and maybe like slide 14, is it? Maybe I'm just off the top of my head, I could be wrong, but like, is it slide 14, 12? It's like a few more slides down. I think it's 14. Yeah, here. Sorry, one slide back. Yes, one slide back, please. That's the Connecticut. Yeah, so here, so we got kind of one piece of substantive feedback was to look at what Connecticut itself is doing, because one of the ways that we sort of put forth as a way to realize the vision really is to look at how having more kind of paid experiential type sort of preparation, and so one request was, what is Connecticut doing in that regard, so we can kind of learn, see where we are, and then kind of I guess compare with what other states are doing. So to that end, we added this one extra slide. Having talked to CSDE, I talked to Lauren and her colleagues from the apprenticeship team to kind of get a better understanding of what Connecticut is doing. And so these are kind of the design principles that we gleaned from our conversation with CSDE, which like encouragingly does exhibit some of the features that we highlighted as making for kind of effective blurring of the lines between EPP and LEA. So this is one addition as well. And I think that's everything we kind of updated. The other stuff, it's, the thought exchange has been in there already. It was shared in the August board meeting already. So that's kind of everything we've added.
Liz, did you want to add from the CPRO team, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble with my Teams. The only other thing I wanted to add, and I know we're trying to connect with Jen about this, but just to refer to one of the outstanding items around states that were in the sort of ranked top, in the top, at one point someone mentioned 10, another point 20. We are looking to meet with Jen to clarify, but it would be helpful if there's any direction you want to provide around sort of, you know, by what measures. We did go back to all of the states that we have referenced as examples that we pulled from, and all would meet the bar on various measures for being in the top 20 states. And in fact, a number of the states on a number of the measures do rank higher than Connecticut on national measures. So none of the states that we've referenced are states that would be sort of considered bottom states. And so I'm not sure what else you all want with regard to that particular request. We're happy to fulfill it, but that's just sort of, I did want to state that. Like, we did go back and check performance of the various reference states just to confirm that sort of they were, and I think this was the reason that it was asked, you know, are these states really doing the right things for kids? And so we did go back and look at, again, there are sort of multiple measures you could look at, but all of the states have performance measures that you could point to that indicate that it's a reason to think that their state is sort of providing a credible example of an education system. So if there's more that you want there, and I know we're also trying to schedule with Jen Rodriguez to get to sort of figure out what else would be helpful there too.
So thank you so much for putting this together and being receptive to the feedback. You have incorporated the thought exchange survey. You incorporated the in-person kind of thought exchange conversation from the board. And in hearing the kind of examples, particularly from ASU. And then you have researched like Connecticut EPPs, and you've included that in there. And then in terms of the researching for the last question, Liz, that you asked about states ranked in the top 10 to 20 nationally, I know that it's a wide open. Is it top 10 ranked for PK-12 education, top ranked for educator preparation? Those lists look slightly different, not too much, but slightly different.
And they're different lists actually too. Like you could have multiple, you know,
right.
Yeah.
Different people are going to list different top 10s. And so, you know, I know SDE has pulled already a lot of research around like what other states are doing. I mean, we could be looking just at the states that we have reciprocity with, because that is the state has already determined that those are states that we would have direct reciprocity versus kind of the larger reciprocal process. So I am good with what has been presented thus far to bring forth to the board. Cynthia, Shannon, Jen, Anne, do you have any questions or want to add anything?
No.
Jen?
Want to see? Oh, sorry.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to clarify that I think that was one of the action item requirements in there was that top 10 or so states and cross-reference that to those who we have reciprocity with. So kind of taking a look at that, I think that's what the action item had listed. So if, you know, we're able to do that, and I'll get more information to you. It's just been a very busy week and I haven't been able to schedule a meeting. So I appreciate you taking the time and providing me with some dates.
Okay. Yeah, of course, Jen, and we can close it out. I think we just weren't exactly sure. Like I said, we checked the states that we've referred to and confirmed that they meet sort of that expectation of states
To help
that
me
are.
in this process, Liz, could you share with me, you said that there are several different lists to look at.
Yeah.
Could you send me the several different lists so that I have a general understanding of what I'm looking at? And then we can kind of focus our conversation around that if that's helpful.
Sure, we can send some of the ways that you might look at it. But we can also go the reciprocity route too. Essentially, as I'm sure you all live out day to day. There are just multiple measures. But New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, all which are referenced here, are all in that reciprocity category already. So I guess what we're trying to say is, as you move forward, we can provide additional research. But what we have done is when we look for strong examples, we've been very sort of cognizant of choosing from other states that are in those top rankings, and we hadn't really considered the reciprocity to be a gating thing, but you're right. This SDE already did go through and sort of consider what their equivalent states were, and all of those states do meet that bar already set forth by the SDE.
Great. Cynthia?
And Jen, we can follow up on the email scheduling.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for this work. It's very invigorating and exciting. I love the idea of pre-teachers getting paid for their internship and their work. That's very creative. I'm curious about another idea that I had mentioned before in the committee about the possibility of having praxis be an end of semester, end of course exam as part of the college experience, where maybe it could be embedded into college with a pass prior to, people looking for a new job. And if there are other states that already do that. So I guess that's my question, is if you have any research or have heard about that type of setup around the country.
Anne,
Just,
yeah,
yeah,
did you want
just
to
to-
address that one or
yeah,
should I-
address
okay, great.
Cynthia.
Yeah.
Cynthia. In actuality, Cynthia, the EPP can do that of their own doing. I mean, we do that. We have requirements above and beyond, and also within the program that are tied to praxis, that are tied to EdTPA. So there's a program can do that if they want to. It's not unusual for programs to necessarily do that. They don't necessarily wait until post-graduation to have people do the exams, especially with praxis, because being content exams, often the EPP program, it relies on the larger university or a prior degree to say your math content, and so you can almost take it at any point, especially with praxis content. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So I don't think that would be, I don't know that you'd want to mandate that necessarily, but it could be a recommendation. And that's where I go back to this whole idea that, do we want it to be regulatory or do we want it to be a guideline? If it's a guideline and you say, this is good practice, this is what Connecticut thinks it ought to be, and it ought to be that praxis is embedded in your programs, then those programs can go back and do that, right? But to make it regulatory changes the whole situation. And that's why I had that conversation earlier. I really feel it's important that we recognize regulatory is not, it has not done us much good. We'll be back where we are right now in another 10 years, looking at regulations if we keep doing this. Guidelines are better for everyone in terms of flexibility.
There are still fees associated with taking the praxis as part of the college program for most students.
It depends. It can depend. Okay. You can roll it into financial aid. You can have certain situations where they are covered. The state had been covering a lot of the fees up until this year. So it really, again, would depend on the university and how they want to. We have a fee structure along with tuition. So sometimes we just roll those fees into, and so they're covered by financial aid, and then we pull from those funds.
Thank you.
Jen?
Thank you. Two things. I think the University of Bridgeport already has this existing policy of taking the praxis as part of passing their student teachership semester. So that might be something to look into for CPRL if that's a road that we want to look at or find more information on. Additionally, I think I heard Liz talk about residency. On the slides, it has apprenticeship programs, which is great, but I think we already have some residency programs in the state of Connecticut that we could also look at. I think that Ann's university actually has a residency program. So maybe providing more information on what universities have those residency programs and how they're working and what their retention rates look like over time at that 2 and 4 year mark.
We have all that data.
Any other questions? Liz or Tong, did you want to respond with anything additional to Cynthia's questions about praxis being used within the EPP context or residency? All right. Okay, then I'd like to, I'll make a motion that we present the presentation as is to the board on October 20th. Have a second?
I'll second.
And open for discussion. Jen, is that a discussion or were you going to in favor?
No, sorry.
Okay, any discussion?
Just clarification, would CPRL be presenting at the October 20th meeting? Or would we be, how is it being presented at the October 20th meeting?
My preference is that CPRL would do similar to what they have shared here. Our whole board has looked over the educator as like a facilitator, and like we've already done that. This would just give the rest of the vision and naming what's been added since the last time the board saw it. CPRL, would that be possible?
So would that be part of your update then, Rebecca?
Like, what do you mean? Like,
so as part
if we move it.
The vision ad hoc, would you, if we move it forward, would this be part of your part of your update?
Yes. Okay. So I don't hear any, is there any other questions? Comments? Okay, all in favor of bringing this into our sharing with our larger board via the vision ad hoc updates on October 20th?
Can I have a roll call vote? Because it's hard to see who's raising their hand.
Sure.
Sure.
We should be doing a roll call for any virtual meeting. It just makes it a bit easier and tidier.
Okay. Anne?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Jen?
Abstaining.
Shannon?
Yes.
Rebecca? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We will take a moment for public participation. Is there anybody in the public that wanted to participate today?
I didn't receive any written notifications, so I would say no.
Okay. And with that, I will.
May I ask
Yep. Yes,
a question before you go? I don't know if this is the right part, but just with clarity and process, I'm curious if we had public participation, does the chair respond at that time, or do we just take public participation and not respond? Sometimes boards do them two different ways, so I was curious on the rules on that.
We take public participation and not respond.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, second.
All right. And that's it. We're done. Thank you, everybody.
Do we have to
Thank
take a roll
you.
call or no?
Do you need to take a roll call, Karen?
Not to adjourn.
Okay.
Not to adjourn. You
you.
can adjourn by consensus, or you can just say you as the chair, adjourn, meeting adjourned. Either way
Meeting
is
adjourned.
fine. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Have a
All
good
right.
afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.